Hello friends, welcome. Friends, today we are going to talk about a very important topic, and this is regarding satellite communication support on simple plain commercial mobile phones. We are not talking about sat phones, we are talking about commercial mobile phones. Now friends, this topic has become a point of discussion for a long period of time because people are excited about communicating without using a terrestrial mobile coverage, and that is definitely is creating a lot of excitement within the people that you really don't require a terrestrial mobile network for making your communication, but doing all the various type of communication means using data or using voice services. Now this is such an important topic, and it has created so much amount of euphoria within the public domain that people are sometimes getting carried away in a completely different direction. That is not reality. Means that is not what the satellite communication is capable of doing. So with this video, I am going to explain to you that what are the opportunities and what are the constraints of a typical satellite network. Now this discussion got triggered by an article which I saw. That is, it got published on 23rd January 2025, saying that Samsung Galaxy S25 series has dormant satellite communication support. Now friends, many of your learned viewers must be knowing that Apple has provided a similar services in US where emergency communication can be enabled using a simple Apple phone. You can send SMSs and you can receive SMSs without the coverage of any terrestrial network. So without wasting any time, let's go a little deep dive and understand the technicalities in simple layman terms so that you can understand the overall system and appreciate what kind of services the satellite can provide over a conventional mobile phone. That's the whole purpose of the video, and I think you will find this video very exciting, right? Because these are very difficult technical issues which are not easy to understand. Now before I go further, I will like to point you to an article which I wrote exactly on this topic, and this I wrote around a couple of months back on 27th November 2024, and I'm going to paste a link of this article in the description. So this article captures some of the challenges which I'm going to describe, and let me explain to you in simple terms. The first thing is, when you are trying to communicate using a conventional mobile phone to a satellite, that itself is pretty challenging. You know why? The first important constraint is you are using a commercial mobile phone, not a satellite phone. Now the viewers may ask that what is the problem if I am using a conventional mobile phone? The first challenge comes on the regulatory limits on the power capability that a conventional mobile phone can output. It is 23 dBm. Now your 23 dBm is 0.2 watts. 0.2 watts is a very small power, and it has been deliberately kept like that so that human body is not harmed because of RF radiation. Because the power levels are so low, communicating using a conventional mobile phone to a satellite can be very challenging. Reason is very simple. The satellite is at a distance of roughly between, you can say even the lowest orbit, it will be around 250 to 300 kilometers versus a tower which is located, even it is the farthest, it will be not beyond 10 kilometers. So let's assume that you are trying to communicate with a terrestrial tower which is 10 kilometers away versus communicating to a satellite which is 300 to 600 kilometers away. So that is going to require a satellite with a high sensitivity, sensitive system, receiver system, so that to able to catch those signals emanating out of those mobiles, right? So this is the first challenge. The second challenge is that when you are communicating using a conventional mobile phone, then what happens is that the frequency of communication matters. And this is a very important topic which people may not be aware of because it becomes a little technical, right? Why I'm saying frequency matters? Because frequency of communication can be from less than 1 gigahertz to more than 12, 24, 25 gigahertz. Like all the licenses which are supposed to be given today to Starlink, Bharti Airtel, Reliance Jio are going to be at that level, means between 10 gigahertz to 20 gigahertz, 26 gigahertz, because the frequency will be at that particular range. Now friends, at this level of frequency, 10 gigahertz, 12 gigahertz, 15 gigahertz, there is no way you will be able to communicate to a conventional mobile phone, which is handheld device like of this size, is not going to receive signal at that particular frequency, that was high frequency. Now for a phone to be able to communicate to the satellite, the frequencies has to be very low. It will be at the framework of conventional terrestrial mobile system, which is, let's say, 1800 megahertz band, 2100 megahertz band, L band or sub-gigahertz spectrum, which is typically the spectrum in which you are communicating to the terrestrial base station for your daily mobile 5G, 4G purposes. So the phones, the signal has to be within that particular bandwidth of conventional mobile phone at a lower frequency. Then only you will be able to communicate to a conventional mobile phone, because if it is at a higher frequency, technically it is going to be impossible, because the beams are going to become so sharper and narrower that it will be impossible to point to the satellite system back and forth for the mobile, for the whole system to talk to each other. So second point is that higher frequency is ruled out as far as communicating to the conventional mobile phone. Third important point is, which is absolutely important, is that if you are going to use a commercial mobile phone, then the satellite has to communicate within the same block of spectrum which the phone has been configured for. For example, let's say if I'm holding a conventional mobile phone in my hand and I'm trying to use a 4G or a 5G services in India. Okay, so that's what we typically do. So what spectrum we are using? You're using 700 megahertz band, 800 megahertz band, 1800 megahertz band, 2100 megahertz band, 3500 megahertz band, 2300 megahertz band. So these are the conventional spectrum blocks or bands which are typically used for communicating to a terrestrial tower for availing those services. Now let's say if the satellite is hanging on the sky, and if it is transmitting in a different block of spectrum, even if it is within a sub-gigahertz or within a frequency band in which it is possible to technically communicate with the mobile phone and does not fall within the bracket of the spectrum for which the commercial operations are supported, then there is no way you can use a commercial phone to communicate with the satellite. The satellite has to use the same block of spectrum, right, for the commercial device to work. Otherwise it is not going to work. So what does it mean? It basically means that the commercial spectrum which a operator is using, let's assume that it is 2100 megahertz band, the satellite signal is going to fall within the same block of spectrum. That poses a very, very difficult challenge, and let me explain by using a diagram so that you understand what the challenge that it is going to pose. Let me just show you a hybrid network architecture, which is going to give you a very good sense, right? So this hybrid network architecture that you see in front of you, this is the diagram which you see in front of you. This is a hybrid network. What does it hybrid network means? It basically means that network architecture is supported using two different type of transmission system. This is being drawn specially with the purpose of broadcasting. I really didn't get time to draw a separate satellite diagram, so be with me. I am the only guy, doing everything together, so I really don't have time to do many more things which a conventional professional YouTube channel will be doing. So be with me, but I will give you the content which you will not get from anywhere else. Okay, so let's assume that this is the satellite system tower which is trying to reach a mobile phone on ground, and these are terrestrial systems. Can you see that? These are terrestrial systems. So if you are in a network without the satellite system, let me just show you how the system works. The satellite is transmitting, reaching the mobile, and then the terrestrial transmission is also reaching the mobile. So there are two different paths which are being used to reach the mobile. Get it? You got it, right? Now what kind of problems it will create? The basic problem that will create is the signal. Let me show you another diagram which will make you understand this problem very clearly. So you'll see that this base station is 5 kilometers away from the mobile, and this is, let's say, 200 or 100 kilometers away. So when the signal gets transmitted from here and the signal gets transmitted from here, in order for both the signal to work in the same block of spectrum, because they are using the same commercial block of spectrum, mind you. So what will happen? So the frames which are actually reaching this particular point, emanating from the satellite system as well as from the terrestrial BTS, has to match in phase. Otherwise, this mobile phone will be confused. If they are out of phase and if they are overlapping on top of each other, then whatever is getting transmitted from here and whatever is getting transmitted from here, you'll create confusion within the mobile system. The mobile will not be able to understand what to read, what not to read. So, in order to ensure that the signals are in phase, there is a concept called cyclic prefix. This is a technical term. Don't get confused with cyclic prefix. Just understand that there is a mechanism in place in conventional network to deal with this kind of disparity, because it may happen that signals from different terrestrial base station may reach the mobile phones hopping across the atmospheric system where signals travel far. Similarly, here the signal is traveling a long distance and it is going to reach the mobile with out of phase. This is going to create a huge challenge in mobile phone receiving signals from satellite as they are receiving signals from terrestrial base station, because it will make the system very inefficient. It is not going to work, with the same level of efficiency, because this particular satellite system is going to create interference on the mobile. So then what does it mean? Then how the system works? Typically, whenever you saw the Apple system is working in US, in the Samsung has come out with a Qualcomm based system which is also going to send signals up and down within the satellites for emergency communication. It works in areas where there are no terrestrial coverage, because if the terrestrial base station does not exist, and if this is only a satellite system having to communicate with a mobile phone which is out of coverage from the terrestrial system, then this problem of aggregation of signal at the mobile phone emanating from two different systems which are out of phase with each other will no longer be required. So, which actually means that the satellite system is meant to operate in location where there is no terrestrial coverage. If there are no terrestrial coverage in areas where the satellite systems are supposed to operate, means they are catering for a very small proportion of population who are trekking, who probably will go to Mount Everest, who will be basically going in their high-end you can say ships, or maybe traveling in some kind of vacation. So this is actually not meant for the common man. So from an India point of view, where the coverage is almost 99%, which the mobile operator claims, there could be some forest areas, some lakes, some mountainous regions where there will be no coverage, this kind of satellite direct to mobile system can be effective. Do you understand now what the issue is? So that is why this system, when we talk about that, mobiles will operate without coverage, without terrestrial coverage, is nothing but a big hype. This is not a reality, because system does not work in this manner. The fourth important or the fifth important point is that the throughput of a system like this, which is directly communicating with the satellite, is going to be much lower than the terrestrial system. It is not going to be at par with the terrestrial system. Why I'm saying so? Because of the following reason. Again, this is very technical, and let me try to explain this in as simple terms as possible, right? Using the same diagram. Now let's say if you are transmitting, if the base station is transmitting from here and it is trying to reach the mobile, right? Let me just zoom in a little bit so that it is much clearer and you are able to get the concept. So I am transmitting, my base station is transmitting back to the mobile. Now mobile is not able to receive this signal. Mobile says that I can't get what you said, because there could be some blockage here, some kind of atmospheric disturbance, something will happen. Now, because of that, what will happen is that this mobile phone will request the base station for retransmission. It will say that, look, I could not understand what you said, please retransmit. Okay. So it will retransmit. So what will happen is, because the distance is so low, 5 kilometers only, retransmission is not going to increase the load on the system. the system will be able to deal with higher bit rate. Means you will be able to transmit signal at a higher bit rate, because as you transmit at a higher bit rate, the chances of signal fading with noise increases. But the bandwidth of the system increases tremendously, because the higher the bit rate, more will be the bandwidth, more will be the data speed that you will be able to transmit within a small quantum of spectrum. So, if in a terrestrial system, your data throughput is going to increase significantly. Now, but consider a system which is using the same quantum of spectrum, trying to use a satellite system. It is 200 or 300 kilometers away. Now, if you are transmitting from the satellite system to the mobile phone, and the mobile phone has not received the signal and the signal has faded away, asking for retransmission from the satellite system is going to be pretty costly. So you will not ask for retransmission. So what you will do, you will reduce your bit rate. You reduce your bit rate, you will use a bit system. You will use a digital encoding system which is going to be of a lower bit rate, means at a lower QAM. That will decrease the throughput of the system, because your bit rate is not going to be high. So your proportional bandwidth that you're going to get on your mobile phone is going to be dependent upon how much is the throughput. What is the bit rate of the transmission emanating from the satellite system? Okay, so your throughput is going to be lower. The other problem, which is also very significant, is the following, which is I am going to explain to you by using this diagram, right? Now, if you look at conventional terrestrial system, you will find that the radius of conventional terrestrial system is pretty low. Sometimes, it is as low as 2 kilometers or maybe 600 meters, depending upon whether it is a coverage-based system or it is a capacity-based system, right? Now, even it's a coverage-based system, it means not going to go beyond 5 kilometers, right? Whereas, in case of satellite, the basic problem is that the number of satellites which are allowed to operate by a regulator is quite limited by the number of base stations which are allowed to operate on ground. It can be a factor of many times. So because of this geographical segmentation possible in case of a terrestrial system, if you are using a small quantum of spectrum, you can reuse the same frequency multiple times in the same geography. Means in the multiple geography, because you have broken the geography into smaller pieces. So you can use it again and again. So you will be able to serve more number of users, and those users are not going to get constrained because of lower quantum of spectrum. So you will get a better data speed. Whereas in case of satellite, the coverage is going to be a much larger compared to because number of satellites are less, they need to cover larger geography. So if the density of the population within this geography remains the same, you can imagine that you are using the same quantum of spectrum, 10 megahertz or 20 megahertz or 30 megahertz, you will not be able to cater to large number of people at the same throughput, because this area is much larger than the smaller areas which are supported by individual base station through geographical separation and frequency reuse. That's why the throughput is going to be pretty less. It is not going to be as high as what you see in case of a terrestrial system. So these are the things which are going to be extremely challenging. And then there will be another problem which I am not drawn diagram in this particular presentation. Let me explain. Now what happens is, when you have launched a satellite, the satellites are of different sizes. Some satellites are pretty small. Some satellites will be a little larger. The smaller satellites are easy to manage, and the regulatory permission for those satellites are pretty easy to get. For example, those satellites which are operating for broadband internet connectivity are going to be smaller of size. Why it will be smaller size? Because their antennas can be packed in a smaller form factor. Because higher the frequency, lower is the wavelength, and the antennas are going to be proportional to the wavelength. So it will be of a smaller size duration. So those satellites are easy to manage and you will get permission easily. Therefore, Starlink satellites are of smaller size because they are catering to higher frequency and for higher bandwidth services. So they are easy to manage. But as soon as you start operating in the commercial mobile spectrum, which is of a lower frequency, then what happens? Your size of the satellite will increase. And you will actually have to cater to a larger antenna size also. Your antenna cannot be smaller. It will be protruding out of the satellites in both the direction, and it can be on meters, because the mobile phone transmission signal are going to be pretty low. And in order to receive those signals, you need to have a higher gain of those antennas. So your satellites are going to become very overwhelming. The same conventional satellite which are used for broadband connectivity is not going to work. You need to launch a separate next generation satellites. And those satellites are going to cause noise pollution, light pollution, not noise pollution, light pollution. Astronomical services are going to get affected, right? So it is not so easy. So now you understand that how difficult it is to communicate using satellites into commercial mobile device. Then comes the last problem, and I would like to make this problem in front of you so that you understand. Typically what happens in a terrestrial network, these are limited within the geography of a particular country. So within a country, when you are operating any kind of network, you don't have any problem because you can manage this within the geography. But satellites are global communication system. They need to be cuts. They cut across geography. They go anywhere they want. Now, when you launch a satellite, you will be equipping that satellite with all kinds of capability, like frequency bands, band structure, everything. But you won't know which country is going to open what band, what will be the band structure. So you have to tune the satellites to take care of all future network configuration, because you cannot service the satellite on the sky, on the orbit. Once it is up in the sky, it is gone. You cannot do anything. Therefore, what will happen is that you will not be able to visualize what kind of frequency bands are going to get opened in what nations, how you need to reconfigure your network when the satellite flies from one country to another country. That is impossible. So what will happen is that your satellites are going to be equipped with only the networks which are visible right now. It is not going to be future proof. So you will not be able to take care of improved IMT systems which will be emanating in different bands, because every country will have a different band structure. You will not be able to leverage all commercial bands. That is going to pose a very, very difficult problem. And you are going to cause problem and pollution across borders. Because if the network structure immediately changes, let's say if this boundary of India, and let's say if you are into China or Myanmar or Bangladesh, and within the border, the network structure immediately changes. So if the signal is emanating from the satellite, it is crossing on both the borders, then what will happen? There will be pollution which will be taking place, interference which will take place in Bangladesh. So you have to stop services at a buffer zone within the border. You cannot give services beyond the buffer zone. So the satellite services won't be available within the buffer zone of the country, because it will create problems within the network which are rolled out across the borders. So just to cut it short, you can imagine the kind of challenges that it is going to face when you are providing services using a satellite to conventional commercial mobile phones. That is where the problem is. So I might not have been able to cover each and every aspect of this, but I think you got an idea, how challenging this is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to paste the link of these two articles in the description, and then you can take this forward. And if you have any questions, you can let me know in the description, in the comment section, I'll respond to those questions as and when those are available. And many thanks for listening to the end. I'll come back with a new video next time.